So one thing we want to do today was kind of direct conversation towards obviously events and towards like strategy, approach, and this idea of when you do go to events, one of the things we talk about at our company is essentially that like trade shows and events are a sales and marketing strategy, not just the cost of doing business. And it's something that we like thoroughly believe. So part of the conversation really want to have today was, you've done some really interesting things with your association's event, right? Where your ideal clients are. So first, tell everybody, because I know, but what is the show that you all exhibit at, attend, that kind of has your ideal client?
Yeah. First off, I had a chance to meet a few of you before we got started, but not everybody yet. So pleasure to meet everybody. Andrew Smallwood, a company I work with is Second Nature. And for context, what Second Nature is a B2B prop tech SaaS platform for rental property managers, residential property managers. And because of that, the association that we focus on is called NARPM, which stands for National Association of Residential Property Managers. So you can see why people use the acronym. Mm-hmm. And NARPM holds 2 national annual events per year, the largest of which is their national convention, typically held in the month of October. So I think your question was what the association was and what the event was.
Yeah, like who's your ideal customer there?
Yeah.
Why do you all attend? Why do you sponsor?
Yeah.
What's the track there for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely a highly qualified audience for who we're trying to reach.
Yep.
It's typically broker owners of the rental property business. Mm-hmm. So that they are the decision makers, that we're trying to meet. And so it's a great place to, find a highly qualified audience for our ICP. And for that reason, it's also popular amongst, competitors and peers, in the property management space. A lot of vendors showing up to that pool.
And you, so you guys have won Partner of the Year 6 times.
That's right.
What does Partner of the Year mean?
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, nobody had actually won Partner of the Year twice in a row before we won it twice in a row.
Yeah.
And we've won it every year since.
6 times. Wow.
6 times, yeah, including this past year. So yeah, I mean, what it means, I would say it means a lot from a brand standpoint.
Yeah.
Customers know this is trusted. It's also not a just like political award. It's actually a member voted award. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, I think we have a good chance to keep it going. But yeah, it means a lot. It's credible to our audience.
So you guys have done some really cool work at your event to engage your customer, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is a big piece that goes on, right? Like when you're exhibiting, when you're hosting events, when you're spending all this time, energy, and money to be there, you have to engage your customer. You have to meaningfully engage your customer. And I think that's something from just our conversations, hearing you on other podcasts and listening to you, that's something that you guys have done really well, right? Mm-hmm. So what's like one really great way that you feel like you guys have done that?
Yeah. So I would say like maybe going back to early days and where we started with this was, where it started was we said a lot of people show up to an event and they are very much kind of following the organizer's flow.
Yep.
Here's the sponsorship that's available. Here are the opportunities that are available. Let me pick from this menu. Let me show up, right? Mm-hmm. And see if I can make the most of that.
Yeah.
And something we decided to do was say, how can we break the frame, of the event and approach this differently and think about just what are our goals for this and how might we think outside the box to achieve those goals. Mm-hmm. And so something we did, that first year that had a lot of success was we said, hey, these are really busy people, hard to get time with. So what if we thought about the week as opposed to, sponsorship opportunities and show up at the trade show floor, creating a VIP experience. Yeah. Because I was talking to these guys over here, and there's some history in the property management industry. Rental property managers, it's a thankless job. Like, how many of you have rented before? Just like, okay. Yeah. How many of you loved your property manager and sent them flowers and, and maybe they didn't earn that, by the way, but just say it's typically an underappreciated job. They're getting calls when something's leaking or on fire or the rent's not there on time or whatever it might be. They're dealing with problems, constantly firefighting. And since they're kind of underappreciated and underrespected from their point of view, treating them like true VIPs hits this it does something very significant, right, for them. So at the airport, we're showing up and we own the color purple in our industry. It's like a sea of blue out there. And then we're this big purple dot kind of.
Everybody's in navy suits.
Yeah. And so, I'm not wearing my purple jacket today. I finally get to wear the rest of my wardrobe out.
There you go.
But, you know, we picked them up from the airport. So they arrive. We got people in purple at the airport holding up signs, VIPs make their way this way. And then we've got our AEs, our salespeople, in black SUVs, and then we usually get one or two exotic cars. So we'll rent like a Ferrari for $700 for the day. And we'll pull up and pick them up, and we're handling their luggage, and then they get 20, 30 minutes, right, of one-on-one time with them arriving to the hotel, right, to the venue. And so we're that first impression, right, when they're showing up. It's quite one-to-one. When those AEs are seeing them throughout the event for the rest of the week, it's like, oh, I know this person, and like they're waving to it, right? It's a different interaction throughout the week. And then right there at the VIP check-in, we're hitting them with like, here's champagne splits and everything else, getting them set up for the week. You know, we're doing things throughout the week, like special room drops. We got, let me think, 350 people kind of enrolled. And every year we've increased the number of enrollees in the VIP experience. This past year we had over 450. But I'm thinking a couple years ago we had 300 and we got cookies made, not with Second Nature's logo all over them, but we had 300 individual logos. These were like hand-piped, you know, pieces.
Yeah.
And I mean, they just ended up all over social, everything like that. And so we're doing all these things every single day. And we talked to our team about what's not the least we can do, what's the most we can do. And thinking about events from that perspective to really get people's attention and earn that engagement in a way that builds trust and builds a relationship with them.
I like that kind of hits on the topic of saying like going big in areas where others are not. That's something I've heard you say before, right? I think when it comes to business and it comes to events, I think it's an interesting thing because when you go to an event, you are trying to stand out, right? You know, you and I were talking earlier about trade shows. It's a sea of parity. So how do you stand out? Talk a little bit about like that idea, that concept of saying, I'm going to go big in areas where others are not.
Yeah, so I mean, I like going big in areas others are not going at all. And
What's an example? Like, give me an example of that. Like where you're looking compared to your competitors. Say, hey, we're all going to go to this show, or I'm going to do this because they are absolutely not doing it, and I know it's going to stand out.
Yeah. So like picking people up from the airport's an example of that.
One. In a Ferrari.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, but a good example of, it's just so people can kind of understand Second Nature's context here. There are players in our space who are multi-billion-dollar companies. Like we are not the largest company in our space, but it very much feels that way to people when we're showing up. And there's typically a night of the conviction, Thursday night, where all of these billion-dollar players, like they're all competing with each other and just beating the hell out of each other to throw the biggest party. Right? And so they're spending massive budget and everything else. And we saw like, wait, Wednesday night, the night before, after the trade show ends, nobody's doing anything there after 8 p.m. And so like we're like, wow, we don't even have to pay for food, and like we can just throw this great party for probably a third of the budget, and we got 5 times the number of attendees, and it was the talk, you know, of the event. And so like we look for opportunities like that. I wouldn't say we did anything terribly creative with our party itself. It was more of a timing and opportunistic thing there, but other things that we're doing throughout the event. I hate the idea that, hey, I'm going to spend 10% more on my fidget spinners, you know, or tchotchkes.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that's going to be effective. And so what we were doing is, hey, deep relationships and VIP relationships, as opposed to spending, you know, something on a swagger giveaway, we would go like 100x on that. And we would say, actually, for a budget of $100 or $200 per person, and I get people may have different customers and business models here, but, you know, for us and for our industry, that was like, you know, a big move of, here's something totally personalized and a signed jersey from their favorite player waiting, you know, in a rim drop for them when they got back to their room. Things like that were areas where we went big.
You know, I think it's funny. That's kind of like, you know, we were talking earlier, we were saying it's kind of this idea of like guerrilla marketing, right? Events, to me, are always like a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of work, right? So anybody that's ever managed events, you know, that's a thing. It's like, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of output just to going into this one thing. So it kind of, I'm a firm believer of like, you got to go squeeze the fruit to get the juice, and guerrilla marketing and the idea of being creative, finding the gap, finding an opening, doing something unique and different. And that to me is really just more of a mindset. It seems like that you've had with your company and things that you all have done that has gotten you Partner of the Year and given you success. Mark.
Can I ask, Andrew, did you do this as a true guerrilla marketing exercise separate from any deal with the organizer, or did you cut a deal with the organizer to get them to promote your VIP collection service?
We asked for a lot of forgiveness as it related to the organizer. We do have a great relationship with them, and obviously we are the 6-time member. We're loved by their members, and that helps. And we've tried to be more collaborative with them. So this past year, as an example, once a year I'll have a meeting with the CEO, right, of the trade association and just talk about their goals, what they're stuck on, progress, how we can be helpful and supportive. And a big thing for them is member growth. They're really struggling to market and grow the membership. And so what we said is, hey, why don't we work on at these large events where we know you guys have strong, loyal, community members there. If we can help bring more people to these events, great. And so we got them to do reduced or comped, tickets, and then we were paying for travel vouchers in exchange for people to, have a meeting with us, right, as an example, and just kind of working collaboratively with them on that. But in a lot of cases, we were just not asking for permission and just kind of doing what we wanted to do.
Go ahead.
So in theory, could the organizer steal your idea and sell it to another billion-dollar business?
100% they could.
It would be dishonorable of them to do so, right? But
yeah. I mean, I think we've seen some of the things that we've done. They're like, oh, that's a great idea. Then they start making it part of a sponsorship, which doesn't really bother us per se, because we keep thinking every year of like, what's the novel experience we're going to create here? And so if they decide to, make that a part of their offering, that's okay. But most of the stuff is, most of their companies struggle to just say, we're willing to take that risk or do something that outside the box. So we find a lot of the bigger companies get stuck on that.
and it would look pretty grubby, wouldn't it? If
Yeah.
somebody else tried to steal in there.
Well, something kind of funny about that.
Established it.
Hopefully it gets their brains turning though on doing something different, offering different things, and creating differentiation for sponsors. Because I think that it's tough when you're sponsoring an event and you go there and you're going to hand, they send, we dealt with this the other day, they send you a big menu and they're like, hey, here's the menu of just generic stuff. And you're like, well, where's the value in some of this? And they really have a very difficult time answering as to why it's a good sponsorship. Mm-hmm. So that's why creative people are creating their own sponsorships, doing their own thing. So it's, it's tough.
Yep. Yeah, just a note on that too. So we wear, a lot of people at our trade shows, they will wear like a polo, right, with their logo on it. And think, rental property managers, they're like working with tradespeople, and that's kind of the vibe there, right? So there's a lot of like polos with a logo on it. We got these purple suits, like all purple. It's kind of wild, to look at. If you
It is
look
full.
at,
It is full. I've seen it's full purple. It's not like not lavender or something. It's like purple.
It's not subtle. And so if you go to my LinkedIn, you can see an example of it. But something we did see was like, okay, then there was a vendor. A couple years later, they started wearing like green jackets, and then this pest control company wears orange shoes now. I'm like, it's gonna look like a carnival rainbow, I think. But that's like a good signal, I think, that you're onto something when you see other vendors, starting to follow suit, and the customers and the people there, know who's really kind of leading that charge.
Yeah. If anybody during this, if anybody has any questions, I mean, just raise your hand. You can pop in. You can ask whatever you'd like. We're here for it. So one of the things else that you've said that I really like is this idea of showing customers that you care, right? So you have a really good take on this with your customers. Again, I think so much of this, the way you run your business bleeds into the way events are. Because you talk to anybody, you're going to an event because of the customer, right? You want to get face to face. You want to be there with them. So then it's this idea of like, okay, how do I show someone that I give a shit, right? Like, how do I show someone that like I see them, I know your problem, and you're not selling them like, hey, here's, I can help you with A, B, and C, but you're just showing them this like empathy that you get it. And I think you've done a good job of that. So talk a little bit about showing this like care, towards your customers.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier with the idea like they feel like unappreciated, right? Like I think that's a really interesting, that's a good take.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, when we talk to our team about here's our explicit goals, right, for this event. Yes, we're getting this many, here's the number of attendees, here's how many we're gonna get signed up for our VIP experience, here's what we're gonna do from a sales accepted lead standpoint, here's what we're gonna do, on a metric standpoint. And we also talk about, we label these events, we call them lightning strike marketing events. And the idea of a lightning strike is it's this magnetizing to attention type of thing. And that instead of peanut butter spreading all of our budget, right, across a bunch of different marketing channels or even a lot of different events, how do we focus it all in one place, right, to create this just, impossible to not look at type of spectacle, right? And so that's a marketing strategy and decision we have. And we say, hey, part of this is really appreciation and expression of radical gratitude and generosity to our customers. It's not just the prospects, but year over year over year, we've had an increasing market share, right, in this event, right? So increasingly, we have more customers there and fewer prospects. And we say, hey, not just doing all this for your prospects, but keeping the focus on our customers. Because what we find is we can have, our 20, 30 people showing up in purple jackets, which is a lot more than most people bring. But then you have 40 other customers running around, and half the people that are speaking on stage are wearing their purple jacket on stage. And there's this feeling of wow, here's everything this company does for their customers, and I want to be treated like that, right? That attracts more people in. And when you treat prospects well, you're like, you should just see how we treat our customers, right? And they get to see that in a visible way. And so I think, for our team, there's handwritten notes, there's things that are thoughtful and personalized and the kind of stuff that you can't fake, but we hire for it. I mean, in our interview process, we're asking people, I'll say, tell me a story about just when you made somebody's day. Tell me about a time, right, where you really went above and beyond to build a great relationship, what that looked like. And I'm looking for examples of people that are going to be culture fit, for what we're trying to do.
A lot of that to me sounds like you're listening to your customer. You're really trying to hear them and know who they are, and then you're trying to deliver on that through your team and at events. Moment making. This is another thing that you said that really piqued my interest, is this idea of experience and moment making. I think in the trade show event world, experiential and the word just gets thrown around, dragged through the mud and, put all over the place. But the idea of making moments for your customer that they will remember, I think is interesting. So if you could talk a little bit on that, I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, so if you think about the market category that Second Nature is focused on, is we're a resident experience platform, right? And so we think about creating great experiences for residents, property manager, investor, the property investor, and the property manager. And our marketing, experiential marketing, is an important part of that, of really showing, expressing who we are, right, and what we're about. It matters to us. And moment making is what we call, it's kind of like the atomic level of the experience building, right? Throughout the week of that VIP experience, we're doing things to make moments happen. And people are coming in with that intention of, how do I make a moment happen for somebody else that makes them pull their phone out? You'll see hashtag Second Nature VIP, I think, on Facebook. You'll read paragraphs of customers of ours just pouring out just emotional appreciation, right? And that flows. So we're saying, hey, how do we really express boldly, what we want to customers? How do we make them feel how we feel about them, right? In our relationship and the relationship we want to have with them in such a way that, it really inspires something, right, in customers. Yeah. And so I think that's how we teach it. That's how we talk about it, as a discipline of moment making.
I like the way you said that, because I think essentially when you're getting the chance to be with your customer, right? The face-to-face is what matters. That's why events have kind of stood the test of time, right? There's a lot of conversation on why events aren't measured, why events don't have exact ROI and data, but they've just kind of bullied their way through. They're still there. They're still positive. They're still happening. There's still budget being deployed. It's still, people want to go to events. People want to be face-to-face. So it's that idea of, if you are getting someone there, how can you make it memorable? How can you connect with them? How can you have this interaction that they remember your company by, or they remember maybe the way you made them feel, essentially? Tell me, I think what's interesting, and I think it's good for some people in this room, is obviously you're viewing this from a C-suite at your company, right? So you have a certain mindset as to hey, we're going to this event, we're spending this money, we got to do this right. We need to go get results. We need to, a lot of this is not just being cute and doing fun things. It's it's a scrappy way of saying we need to go accomplish something. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's an interesting trait as either an owner or a C-suite or someone is thinking when it is your dollar, when it is the company's, when kind of, I'll say your ass is on the line, but it's essentially what's going on. So talk a little bit about like that mindset as you approach events.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're talking to the executive team and trying to get alignment with the executive team on your strategy and things that you want to do, you need to be able to speak to revenue and you need to be able to speak to reputation. Like those are things that the executive team is going to care about, right? And so talking about how we're defining success and how you're going to measure success up front, and here's our strategy to execute on that. Where I would say like the encouragement we give our team, right, and what we really push our team. I'll give an example. We're going to have an event Pablo's speaking at in Amelia Island. It's in Florida. And it's like on an island in Florida, right? So you can imagine what everybody's message or themes, it's like, it's going to be island themed. There's going to be lays. There's going to, it's like we're thinking about how do we do something very different than that, right? And, for our team, hey, if we accomplish this result, what's the most efficient and effective way we can, get there to generate an ROI? But that doesn't mean spend less, right? And so we don't think of expense as, what's the cheapest way to do things. When we think about resourcefulness, we think about what is the highest and best use of our resources. And it'll come against the scrutiny that'll come up that forces us to get better is not just what's the best spend we could have at events, but what's the spend at events versus other possibilities, right? And looking at it holistically. So I think we work with the team to develop and help, especially junior people, think about building a business case for their ideas, how we're going to measure it up front, and measuring against that success. But it's not just opportunities created net new at that event. There's a lot of ways to create results that lead to your goals from a revenue standpoint, your goals from a reputation standpoint at an event.
What kind of results, like rewind, say you weren't doing what you were doing, but you had the experience, you got hired by a company to come in as the head of events, and you were looking to execute, what kind of advice would you have for someone in that role to say, hey, we have 3 trade shows, 1 host event? What kind of advice would you give them on how to approach, the way to look at it? Like, how would your brain turn on that?
Yeah, I think 2 things that would help to start is, can you quickly understand the company strategy and how to align the marketing strategy and event strategy to those, right? And connect it to those. And second is, do you understand the business model well enough to understand here's the kind of justification and motion that makes sense? Because if you're a large enterprise with 6-7 figure contract value against, an SMB 3,000, ACV, there's going to be different, there's just going to be a different velocity and a different, motion, right? To working that. So understanding the context that you're in, and then, okay, great. How can we blank slate, unconstrained, think about, what are the best ways to drive things through?
I like the idea of the idea of understanding the business initiatives. I think everything has to tie back to that, right? Because the company has a direction. The company is trying to accomplish things. So for events, everybody knows if you're executing events, that essentially it's under scrutiny sometimes of like, what are you contributing to this? So understanding what the company is trying to accomplish, and then even in your own right, trying to tie all that back, I think is super important to be able to say, hey, you said this was important. You said this is the objectives. You said this is essentially where we're trying to go. This is contributing to it. I think that's a great point. Any questions? Anybody? Dia first, go ahead.
I'm a little confused. So the VIP event that you're doing that in conjunction with the show?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the only show you're going to in a given year?
No, we work about 60 events. Yeah, so the question was, is this national event where we're focusing 100% of our budget and it's the only event we do? The answer is absolutely not. So we attend and sponsor probably about 60 events per year.
60?
60.
Okay. So follow-up question to all of that is, what are your touch points with these folks in the meantime? Are you still doing those thoughtful things for them between shows?
Yeah. So the question was, are we just doing these things at the events, or is there other marketing activities that we're doing in an engaging, before, after, ongoing type of ways? That's the question, right? Yeah. So absolutely. So I'll give one example of this. Right now we're running a direct mail ABM campaign where we're sending out these custom-made boxes of Cards Against Property Managers. And so if you've ever played Cards Against Humanity, right, it's this kind of like pithy, funny, anyway. And it's been a huge hit and a great follow-up to keep people engaged. But we targeted specifically people at the event that we were still trying to engage and re-engage post-event, as an example with that. So that's one example, but yeah.
Nice.
Great.
My question, what are some of the best practices from a marketing automation, like some of the tools that you use to really help drive the data that you were looking for, right? You
Yeah.
probably have a lot of prospects that you need to convert.
Mm-hmm.
You have MQLs that have some kind of conversion rate. What are some of the tips and tricks and best practices?
The question is, what's our tech stack tooling look like and best practices as it relates to building out automation, right? I will say I would not say Second Nature is probably the best at this. I don't think this is probably one of our highest and best strengths. We use HubSpot as our marketing automation platform. We use Chili Piper as a lead routing and scheduling tool. And one thing I will say that has been important for us, especially as we have people who are working the events and have interaction opportunities, because our sales force is divided by territory. And so, if Christian on our team who covers Florida is talking to somebody in Nevada, right? He may or may not know who that is and whose calendar, right? And so what we built was, coming into an event, the attendee list and our database, we've worked hard to develop that so that there's as little friction as possible for somebody to be able to get a meeting booked. So all he has to do is put the email in, and that's it. Unique identifier, everything else fills in to pull up AE calendar and book a meeting. And we did find removing all of that friction helped us a lot, right, with increasing, our booked meetings. Yeah, I'd say that's one thing I think we've done well. But in general, actually, I think there's probably other companies that do it better than we do. Yeah.
Hey, Andrew, so Jana was like, I have all these events going on, but they won't provide you the software to track, right? So let's do the opposite. If you didn't have software to track, coming from the C-suite, how would you approach this whole how could somebody manage up to pull out objectives from someone in a way to then do it software-less to then get to the software?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies make this mistake where you'll spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and you won't spend $50,000 or whatever it is, right, that you need to put in place to properly track success. I just think it's insane. And I think it just takes sitting down and having a conversation about where our investments are, right? If we're spending all of this, are we not going to spend this percentage of our budget to properly monitor and track this? And
What is the right percentage?
Again, you'll have to convince, I'm sure different people have different opinions on that. But yeah, from my perspective, I think if you're having trouble getting people to go all the way, then you need to align on a crawl, walk, run approach of saying, okay, well, how can we come to, I'm not saying you need to put your foot down and say, I'm quitting if we don't implement this specific tool. If you have that conviction, I guess you could, but probably the way I would go about that and the way we started was, it was more manual tracking. It was less automated. And okay, there's a place to start, and here's a limited set of metrics that we were tracking, and you need enough of that for the business to be able to say we can make high conviction bets about what is working and what is not working, and where we are going to double down and where we are going to reallocate, right? How can we effectively make those decisions as a company and where it's not slowing down? And then, okay, that's the crawl, here's the walk, right? And when we agree, when we get to this point, here's how we're going to evolve, right, our measurement and the tooling that we're going to use to do it, to be able to make quality decisions that scale as we do.
The manual piece is difficult,
Yeah.
but you kind of have to do it. I think there's a lot, we were talking about it earlier, with leadership where they're not going to believe it till they see it, unfortunately, and they're not going to invest in it. So you may have to pull it from other areas. You may have to do it on your own. But essentially, I think really good data tells the story that you don't have if you don't have it. So it's it's tough. There's going to be leadership that just believes in it. There's going to be leadership that's like, yes, absolutely, let's move that direction. There's going to be leadership that's like, well, put a business case together for me. And then there's going to be leadership that just wants nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it is a very difficult stance to take, because they will continue to spend, which is crazy, but they will continue to spend until things are not good, and then they'll pull back, and it really doesn't make it. It's just this subjective game, right? It's like, well, things are good, we'll blow a bunch of money at a show. Things are not good, we're going to pull back money at a show. So I think event marketers are in a very difficult spot when you're looking for tools, when you're looking for ways of measuring, and you're looking for ways to be able to create a business case to say, hey, we're spending X. X is giving us this, and we are pushing objectives. We are moving in the right direction. But unfortunately, it's a very difficult sell, and I think it's one of the biggest hurdles and humps that's going on in events. Events have gotten away with being what they are because they do work. They work because we're face to face. They work because we can have a conversation. They work because we can sit and have a beer together and talk or get a coffee in the morning. Like, humans want to interact. So events have just made it. They've just survived. I don't want to say on pure luck, but they've survived because they're good, because they work. So now it's a matter of, how do you get to measuring it? How do you get to quantifying it? I explained this to you earlier. We're having a beer, we were talking, I was saying how, like, in an event, there's so much that goes on. I mean, there's so much that happens. You talk to customers, you talk to new prospects, you close deals. Current deals that are in the pipeline get accelerated. You create new partnerships. You get customers that are not customers anymore, that used to be, that are cold, that all of a sudden start spending. There's this laundry list of stuff that can happen at events. The hurdle is now to start quantifying it. The hurdle is now to start saying, putting a story together to say, this does make sense to be here. This is what this show, this event, this is what it does for us, and this is how it contributes to what you said earlier, which is the goals of the company, which is overall direction. Yeah.
So where does AI fall into? Helping or hurting?
I mean, I would say AI helps it tremendously. I mean, think about it. From AI perspective, if you're an event marketer and you have a ton of data, we were talking earlier, if it's surveys, if it's information, if it's leads, if it's whatever it may be, AI would help you organize it. AI would help you categorize it. AI would help you do all different kinds of things. So I can only imagine that it would. And then I think from platforms and software and things that will eventually get built, there will be AI sort of pieces of it that help kind of move it along.
And it's okay that leadership, that's okay. Wherever you get this data from, even if it's AI driven, as long as the data is actually good data.
Yeah. I think the AI would more be, I think the data is going to come from where it's always come from. It's come from the event. It's come from registrants. It's come from surveys. It's come from lead trackers. It's come from people putting data. You still have to have somebody put something in. You still have to be like, hey, this happened. I scanned this. I had this conversation. Rick did a demo with Megan. Like, you know what I mean? That still has to happen. But I think the AI piece is coming up to saying, well, there's a ton of data, and it's a way of summarizing. It's a way of organizing. It's a way of kind of helping you write a story where it might take an individual an hour. AI could do it in 2 minutes. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what it does. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say it would have to play a positive in it, without a doubt. Yeah, for sure.
I'd say we're pretty early on the journey of leveraging AI in our stack. I think there's some interesting tools. Like we used, there's a cool, it starts with a T. I want to say it's Tavis, T-A-V-U-S maybe. It's like a video personalization tool. So I can record 5 minutes of video effectively. Then I can record a specific video and message with some merge fields and whatnot added in. And it'll personalize an invite video to, 400 people, right? We're inviting to a VIP experience, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some interesting use cases. I think we're pretty early. So I'd be curious what others here, have seen, if they're using it. But nice. We're pretty early there.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was really a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.